Good morning. I call to order the 11th meeting of the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission for year 2015. I ask that everyone please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning.
Our first order of business for our agenda is the review and approval of the minutes. And I think that Commissioner Powelson told me I would not have to do the minutes anymore if I became chair. But here I am today reviewing and offering a motion to, I have reviewed the minutes and I offer a motion to accept them.
Second.
We have a motion by me and a second by Vice Chairman Coleman. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any noes? The motion passes. Thank you. We will call up Cheryl Walker Davis, our Director of OSA, to lead us through our agenda for today.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning. Good morning.
May it please this Honorable Commission, on behalf of your various offices and bureaus, we present for your consideration and disposition the following agenda items. Commencing this morning with matters on behalf of the Bureau of Administration, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the recommendation with regard to approving the computation of the amount for the assessments for Broadband Outreach and Aggregation Fund for fiscal year July 1st of 2015 through June 30th of 2016.
Do I have a motion to accept the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's moved by Commissioner Cawley, second by Commissioner Whitmer. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
On behalf of the Bureau of Audits in omnibus fashion, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the agenda items commencing with the recommendation to release the audit report involving Philadelphia Gas Works Universal Service and Energy Conservation Surcharge at the top of page 2, and continuing with all items on pages 2 and 3 through and including the recommendation with regard to the Management, Efficiency, and Investigation Report for the National Fuel Gas Distribution Corporation.
Do I have a motion to accept the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's moved by Vice Chairman Coleman, second by Commissioner Powelson. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
On behalf of the Office of Special Assistance, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the first item at the top of page 4 in the proceeding involving the petition for reconsideration in Core Communications, Inc. versus Verizon PA LLC and Verizon North LLC.
Do I have a motion to accept the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Whitmer. We have a dual second by Vice Chairman Coleman and by Commissioner Cawley. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any objections? The motion passes 5-0.
With regard to the complaint proceeding involving Tyrone Gibbs versus Global Tel-Link Corporation, there is your motion, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. At this time, we'll just call up the staff recommendation. Do I have a motion to call it up?
I move so.
Is there a second?
Second.
So the matter is properly before us with a motion to call it up by Commissioner Cawley with a second by Commissioner Powelson. At this point, I will turn it over to Vice Chairman Coleman to preside since I do have a motion.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to recognize the chairman for the purposes of our motion.
Thank you. Before us today is consideration of the exceptions and reply exceptions to Administrative Law Judge's initial decision issued on November 18, 2014 in the above captioned proceeding. In the initial decision, the ALJ recommended that the formal complaint of Tyrone Gibbs be sustained in part while determining that the complainant failed to make out a case for a refund for drop calls to wireless recipients. In addition, the ALJ recommended a civil penalty in the amount of $300 before Global Tel-Link Corporation failed to provide reasonably continuous service to the complainant. Staff recommends that in making our determinations, we include dropped wireline calls to the cell phones of pre-approved call recipients, remand the matter to determine the refund, and retain the $300 penalty. I disagree with the staff that a refund cannot be determined. The record shows that 6 wireline calls to cell calls were dropped. That complainant did provide credit to the complainant for two of those calls, and that the charge per call was $1.60. The complainant's wireline to wireless calls should be included in this proceeding, and a refund or credit of $1.60 per call for a total of $6.40 be provided to the complainant. So therefore, I move that GTL provide complainant a credit or refund of $6.40 for the 4 of the 6 drop calls that were not previously refunded to a refund or credit. 2, that the case be marked closed once the refund or credit is properly remitted to the complainant and the civil penalty paid. And 3, that OSA prepare an opinion order consistent with this motion.
Do we have a second to the motion?
I second the motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries on a vote 5-0, and I will return the agenda to Chairman Brown.
So in true parliamentary procedure, what we have before us is the staff recommendation as amended by my motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Final vote is 5-0.
Continuing with the presentation of agenda items on behalf of the Office of Special Assistance, turning now to page 5 of the public meeting agenda, it is recommended in omnibus fashion that the Commission adopt the recommendations, commencing with the recommendation in the proceeding involving UGI Distribution Company's Universal Service and Energy Conservation Plan for 2014 to 2017, continuing with the remaining item on page 5, as well as the 2 items appearing on page 6 through and including the recommendation involving Herman Oil and Gas Company, Inc.
Do I have a motion to accept the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Whitmer and second by Vice Chairman Coleman. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
Turning now to page 7 of the public meeting agenda, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the staff recommendation in the proceeding involving the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission versus Wellsboro Electric Company and Citizens Electric Company of Lewisburg with regard to their request for approval of a non-bypassable customer choice support charge.
Do I have a motion to accept the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Vice Chairman Coleman, second by Commissioner Powelson. Any discussion?
Yes, Chairman, I wish to respectfully be recorded as voting no. I would have granted the petition for reconsideration by exercising our discretion under the DUIC standard. This is a small company. I don't think there's any question that these electronic data interchange costs were incurred. And I encourage the company to seek recovery in their next rate case. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cawley. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
The motion passes 4-1, noting the no vote of Commissioner Cawley.
In omnibus fashion, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the staff recommendation in the proceeding involving the Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement versus Pennywise Sedan Service, LLC, at the bottom of page 7, as well as all items appearing on pages 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18 through and including the recommendation involving the Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement versus Heather Nume, TA Royal Limousine Service.
Do I have a motion to accept the staff recommendations?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Cawley, second by Commissioner Whitmer to accept the staff recommendations. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Turning now to matters on behalf of the Bureau of Technical Utility Services. Again, in omnibus fashion, we recommend the adoption of all items commencing with the recommendation for an appointment to the West Penn Power Sustainable Energy Fund Advisory Board, as well as the remaining items on page 19, page 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25 through and including the recommendation involving the York Water Company security registration.
Do I have a motion to accept the staff recommendations?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Vice Chairman Coleman, and I have joint dueling seconds by Commissioners Colley and Powson. I'm hearing very well in my ears, Reese.
Madam Chair, I'll give deference to the senior member of the bench.
So I have a second by Commissioner Colley. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
On page 26, starting matters on behalf of the Law Bureau, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the first two items through and including the recommendation with regard to the proposed rulemaking involving the automatic adjustment clauses related to electric default service.
Do I have a motion to accept the staff recommendations?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Colley with a second by Commissioner Whitmer to accept staff recommendations. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
With regard to the Act 129 Energy Efficiency Program Phase 3 implementation, there is a joint motion that you have, Madam Chairman, along with Commissioner Colley, as well as the statement of Commissioner Powson and the statement of Commissioner Whitmer.
Do I have a motion to call up the staff recommendation for consideration?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Colley to call up the staff recommendation with a second by Commissioner Powson. At this point, I will turn it over to the Vice Chairman to preside.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to recognize Chairman Brown and Commissioner Colley for their joint motion.
Thank you. I will submit my motion for the record, but I will summarize it. Before the Commission is the Act 129 Phase 3 Implementation Order. The order tentatively sets new energy efficiency and demand response targets to be achieved by EDCs over a 5-year period. We would like to thank the stakeholders for helping to inform the Commission during this process. We would also like to thank Commission staff for their diligent work on this matter. We believe the framework set by this order will foster robust energy efficiency and demand response programs to the economic benefit of the state and the EDC customers. However, there are two issues that we would like to address. The first issue involves the prohibition of PJM's emergency demand response accounts from participating in the Act 129 Demand Response Program, a situation referred to as dual participation. The Commission initially proposed to prohibit dual participation, submitting that such a framework prevents the payment of Act 129 energy efficiency programs funds to a customer for an event during which the customer was already curtailing due to signals from PJM. We received a substantial number of comments from parties in opposition to this proposal. For the following reasons, we propose to revise this prohibition and design a DR program that allows for dual participation. First, we are convinced that forbidding dual participation will materially obstruct the EDC's opportunities to comply with the set DR goals. This structure will limit the pool of customers available because many eligible accounts are already enrolled in PJM's emergency demand response. Second, we note that this competition between PJM's programs and Act 129 programs is compounded by PJM's procedures to add back dispatch demand response. In summary, accounts that are dispatched under PJM's emergency demand response have that demand response added back to their peak load in the next year. Customers who do not participate in PJM's program lose the ability to add back their DR dispatch. Therefore, an account only enrolled in Act 129 DR is dispatched during a peak recording hour will potentially diminish its ability to participate in future PJM programs. Third, we note that the Act 129 DR programs are paid for and supported by all EDC customers via a non-bypassable rider. We submit that the prescription of participation by a certain set of customers who are financing these programs is an unjust design. In Phase 1 of Act 129, we permitted dual enrollment. Given the comments in this proceeding, we believe a more gradual transition to a discounted dual enrollment option with safeguards is more appropriate than an outright ban. The imposition of a 50% discount on Act 129 DR incentives for dual enrolled accounts in Act 129 and PJM emergency demand response should mitigate our concerns. Additionally, this proposal will help account for existing demand response capacity that has already installed the infrastructure required to perform. Further, we advise EDCs to design appropriate record retention requirements so that this commission can evaluate the results of this dual participation discount design at the end of Phase 3. The second issue involves the dispatch of demand responses based on the PJM Regional Transmission Organization wide forecast versus the EDC's zonal forecast. Parties on the record submit that the Commission should consider using the ROT wide forecast so as to best target peak summer usage days. We agree with this proposal. Using the RTO wide forecast will make dispatch simpler and will work to better target peak days. This, in turn, will provide the best long-term benefit to customers through reductions in capacity procurement requirements for future years. Therefore, we move that the Law Bureau draft an appropriate order consistent with this motion.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
I'd like to recognize Commissioner Whitmer for the purpose of her statement.
Thank you. I'd like my statement entered into the record as if I had read it in its entirety. Before the Commission today was the consideration and disposition of the Act 129 Phase 3 implementation order that tentatively sets new energy efficiency and demand response targets to be achieved by the EDCs over a 5-year period. As we know, these programs, when they are cost-effectively run, provide numerous benefits to all customers. Throughout Phase 2 and Phase 3, I have been a staunch advocate for removing obstacles that prevent EDCs from including deeper, more comprehensive measures in their energy efficiency programs. Today's action with respect to comprehensive or whole building measures directly aligns with this goal. By mandating the inclusion of at least 2 comprehensive measures, while not limiting the definition of what comprehensive is, we are creating an environment that fosters the inclusion of more comprehensive measures in the EE&C programs. Comprehensive measures such as windows, insulation, furnace upgrades resulting from a switch to natural gas are actions that will produce energy savings over a much longer sustained period of time. Therefore, I'm happy to support this order today. And finally, I too would like to commend the work of the Commission and all the stakeholders to date and look forward to reviewing the EDC's programs that are going to include these comprehensive measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Whitmer. I'd like to recognize Commissioner Powelson for the purposes of his statement. Commissioner Powelson.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. The adoption of today's Phase 3 order ensures that Commonwealth's energy consumers will continue to have options to control their energy usage. And I'd be remiss also this morning in not recognizing the Commission's technical staff, led by Darren Gill, and our legal staff, Chris Brown, who spent countless hours reviewing comments and obviously drafting today's order. I want to thank them for their hard work in putting this document together. Even though we are only in the midst of adopting Phase 3 requirements under Act 129, stakeholders will soon be looking forward to the next iteration of the Act 129 programs. And I want to highlight 2 areas for consideration here this morning. The first dates back to our working group, which I thought was a very successful endeavor on back in 2013, our on-bill financing working group. And I think that on-bill financing provides our utilities an opportunity to provide robust EE&C programs to customers here in the Commonwealth, such as multifamily housing, municipal entities. And I think it's important to recognize that a number of these entities that want to make this investment, this incremental investment, suffer from a little bit of balance sheet fatigue. So on-bill financing provides these entities an opportunity. It was further reported, and I asked my staff to do a little bit of analysis here this morning, but there are 20 other states in the U.S. that provide on-bill financing. So Pennsylvania has a unique opportunity here to step up to the plate and support a pilot program for on-bill financing. And for the record here this morning, no Pennsylvania utilities have thus far proposed any pilot programs. Many of the commenters argued against on-bill financing in Phase 3 for a multitude of reasons. Some of these concerns are valid. We recognize that, but they're not insurmountable. We need to only look at Pennsylvania gas utilities, some of whom have implemented successful on-bill financing programs to finance line extensions. As Commissioner Whitmer mentioned here this morning, it's very clear the cost-benefit ratio to customers converting over from home heating oil to natural gas. And we've seen it in get gas tariffs that have been filed by our utilities, our gas utilities. I continue to believe that our electric distribution companies can consider implementing pilot programs to further study potential benefits of on-bill financing and on-bill repayment. I'm not, however, naive. I fully recognize that gas utilities' willingness to engage in these programs were not completely altruistic. These programs, after all, are helping to drive increased revenue, which makes overcoming the corresponding issues more palatable, while just the opposite is true for EDCs. Successful implementation of on-bill financing measures for energy efficiency in the electric sector would serve to reduce revenue, so overcoming any barriers is less appealing, and we recognize that. I don't want to chastise our electric distribution companies here this morning. Rather, I want to simply recognize the reality of the marketplace. It does, however, lead me to my second point. And there's a number of groups here in Pennsylvania that have commented on the concept of decoupling. And I go back to a former colleague, Commissioner Wayne Gardner, who led an en banc hearing on this issue. But Pennsylvania, now more than ever, needs to consider giving utilities the ability to institute some type of pilot decoupling so as to remove any financial disincentives for utilities to partner with their customers in reducing demand for electricity. In drafting Act 129, the legislature had two options for ensuring compliance with the stated reduction goals. We recognize that one was a stick approach, fines for non-attainment, or the carrot approach, which was the incentive payments for reaching the goals. The legislature chose the stick approach, and as I highlighted above, it has been quite successful thus far, with one footnote, West Penn Power. I therefore do not say this to criticize the legislature for their choices in designing the act. I need not remind anybody in this room. It was the 2008 timeframe, $14 per MMBTU gas, and we had rate caps coming off here in Pennsylvania. So it was a very trying time, not only for the legislature, but for many of us here at the Commission. And I'm proud to say that the construct in front of us is nationally recognized. Just by way of background, Pennsylvania ranks number 20 in the country on the 2014 state scorecard by the National Association of Energy Efficiency Providers. And I think it's a story that remains untold, that Pennsylvania has moved up 5 notches since 2008, and it's it's to be recognized here this morning. I believe, however, that the day will come when the Commonwealth will need to look beyond the current framework of Act 129 to continue to achieve all available energy savings. Therefore, as the stakeholders look beyond Phase 3 and start thinking about what's next, and as the legislature debates likely proposal changes to Act 129, I encourage everyone to strongly consider including some type of decoupling measures in the list of available options for moving forward in Pennsylvania's energy future. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Powelson. Any other discussion?
Vice Chairman, I'd like to associate myself with the Commissioner Powelson's statement.
So noted. So we have a joint motion from Chairman Brown and Commissioner Colley, a second from Commissioner Powson. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries 5-0, noting the statement of Commissioner Whitmer and the statement of Commissioner Powson and Commissioner Whitmer's association with Commissioner Powson's statement. And I will return the agenda to Chairman Brown.
For final disposition of this matter, we have the staff recommendation of the Act 129 Energy Efficiency Program as amended by the joint motion. If there's no objection, we'll just go with the previous roll call, 5-0.
Continuing with the presentation of agenda items on behalf of the Law Bureau, we're now on page 27. It is recommended that the Commission adopt the Law Bureau's recommendation in the proceeding involving the Pike County Light and Power Company's petition for waiver of the Commission's accelerated switching regulations.
Do I have a motion to accept the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
The motion by Commissioner Whitmer, second by Commissioner Powson. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
With regard to the staff recommendation involving the implementation of Chapter 14 amendments, there is the motion of Commissioner Powson as well as an oral statement of Commissioner Colley.
Do I have a motion to call up the staff recommendation for consideration?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Whitmer and second by Vice Chairman Coleman to call up staff recommendation. Under discussion, I will recognize Commissioner Powson for a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was a little nervous there on that pregnant pause to begin, but I'll gleefully read my motion here this morning. Before the Commission for disposition is the final Chapter 14 implementation order, which will serve as guidance as to the effect of the changes that were amended to Act 155 of 2014. And one of the issues in this matter is the changes that Act 155 made to the Commission's practices and procedures related to medical certificates. Specifically, Act 155 added a definition under Section 1403 of the Public Utility Code, which requires that medical certificates be in writing and signed by a physician, nurse practitioner, or physician's assistant. Now, prior to Act 155, the Public Utility Code contained no definition for medical certificates. Rather, the Commission's regulations controlled the definition of what was eligible. More specifically, Section 56-113 allowed for medical certificates to be either written or verbal. Duquesne Light Company seeks guidance here on whether the current practice of accepting verbal medical certificates is to be allowed following the General Assembly's insertion of the new definition of medical certificates into Chapter 14. Specifically, Duquesne explained that when it receives a verbal medical certificate, it documents the information in the customer's account notes. Duquesne believes that these business records should be sufficient to meet the new requirement that medical certificates be a written document. PPL Utilities and Columbia Gas of Pennsylvania similarly requested that the Commission provide flexibility such that utilities can still accept verbal medical certificates. In adding the above definition to Chapter 14, the General Assembly gave clear and unambiguous direction to key aspects of the medical certificate section, that they be written documents and that they be signed. Section 56-113, allowances of verbal medical certificates, is legally incompatible with the definition outlined by the General Assembly. Further, while Duquesne's business records proposals may meet the mandate that medical certificates be written, it clearly would not fulfill the signed by a licensed physician, nurse practitioner, or physician's assistant requirement. Moreover, I believe allowing the status quo regarding verbal medical certificates would subvert the intent of the legislature's inclusion of the written and signed requirements. Therefore, this morning, it is clear that portions of Section 56-113 that allow for verbal medical certificates have been superseded by Chapter 14 and are no longer valid. I note, however, pursuant to Pennsylvania's Electronic Transactions Act, electronic signatures are legally valid. Thus, medical certificates that are electronically transmitted meet the new requirements outlined in Section 1403. Therefore, I move that the Law Bureau prepare a final order consistent with this motion.
Do we have a second to the motion?
Second.
second by Commissioner Whitmer. And do we have any discussion? Commissioner Colley.
Thank you, Chairman. I support this motion. We are required, and those we regulate are required to follow the law. And apparently the legislature felt that it was addressing abuses in the medical certificate situation. There no doubt are occasions when people abuse the medical certificate process in order to stay termination of their service. I worry, however, that because doctors' offices are busy places and doctors are attending to their patients in their offices and their staffs are busy, that there could be those situations where doctors are not going to provide a written medical certificate in time to stay a termination that is legitimate. And therefore, we and utilities must abide by the legislature's wishes and provide a written medical certificate. But I ask them to continue to be reasonable in their application of terminations of service so that there are not those people who fall through the crack who legitimately are ill and cannot have their service terminated. I have every faith that the utilities will use common sense in applying our necessary interpretation of the law. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Powelson. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0. And as the recommendation of staff is before us as amended by the motion, if there's no objection, we'll just take the previous roll call 5-0.
Continuing with matters on behalf of the Law Bureau, with regard to the Law Bureau's recommendation involving the 2016 Total Resource Cost Test for the purpose of determining the benefits and costs associated with the electric distribution company's energy efficiency and conservation plan submitted for approval, we've got the joint motion of Commissioners Colley and Whitmer.
Do I have a motion to call up the staff recommendation for consideration?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Powelson with a second by Vice Chairman Coleman to call up the staff recommendation. And for purposes of discussion, I will recognize Commissioner Colley for the joint motion.
Thank you, Chairman. This motion is on behalf of Commissioner Whitmer and myself. Before us for consideration are refinements to the 2016 Total Resource Cost Test for Phase 3 of implementation of Act 129 of 2008. This Phase 3 will begin on June 1st, 2016. Act 129 requires electric distribution companies with more than 100,000 customers to demonstrate that their plans are cost-effective using this total resource cost test. As a part of the test, the Commission must determine whether non-electric benefits from savings of fossil fuels, such as propane and natural gas and oil, should be factored into the test. Heretofore, the Commission has opted not to include these benefits in the test. The parties to this case, however, have provided compelling support for reversing this position. Commissioner Whitmer and I will not test your patience for a complete reading of this very technical motion. So let me summarize it and ask that the full motion be included in the record as if I had read it in its entirety. Joint commenters, which included Penn Future, the Clean Air Council, the Environmental Defense Council, and the Sierra Club, as well as the National Resources Defense Council, have urged us to make certain changes along these lines. And as well as the Keystone Energy Efficiency Alliance. We believe that these parties are correct in asserting that including fossil fuel and water savings in the TRC test is more consistent with the Commission's inclusion of other quantifiable, emphasis quantifiable, cost savings, such as operation and maintenance savings. We note that other comments have demonstrated that inclusion of water and fossil fuel and O&M savings is consistent with practices in other states, as demonstrated by a 2011 survey. The rest of the motion deals with concerns that have been expressed by PPL and Duquesne Light. Suffice it to say that we suggest that the Commission include fossil fuel and water cost savings in the test, in addition to our current O&M cost savings related to energy efficiency measures. This inclusion, however, does not impact the electricity reduction measurement associated with these measures. It only improves the accuracy of the TRC calculation. The TRC should be modified to include such benefits, to include benefits to the extent that they, again, are reasonably quantifiable. So for these and other reasons explained in the motion, we move that the Law Bureau draft an appropriate order consistent with this motion.
Do I have a second to the motion? I will second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0. The staff recommendation as amended by the motion, we will just go with the previous roll call, 5-0, if there's no objection.
Continuing with matters on behalf of the Law Bureau, now on page 28 of the public meeting agenda, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the recommendations there appearing through and including the last one pertaining to the recommendation involving the Mariana and Scenery Hill Telephone Company, DBA Fairpoint Communications.
Do I have a motion to accept the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Colley, second by Commissioner Powelson. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any objection? The motion passes 5-0.
Now turning to matters presented on behalf of the Office of Administrative Law Judge. With regard to the first item pertaining to ALJ Fordham's initial decision in the proceeding involving Tracy McDonald versus the Philadelphia Gas Works, there is a joint motion that you have, Madam Chairman, with Commissioner Whitmer.
Do I have a motion to call up the staff recommendation for consideration?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Colley, second by Commissioner Powelson. We'll turn it over to Commissioner Whitmer for discussion and proposing the joint motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of you and I would like our joint motion to be entered into the record as if I'd read it in its entirety. Before the Commission for consideration is the initial decision of Tracy McDonald versus Philadelphia Gas Works. The complainant filed a formal complaint alleging improper termination and incorrect billing. A hearing notice was scheduled. It was sent and was scheduled for Monday, March 24th at 10 a.m. Subsequently, a pre-hearing order dated for February 25th advised all of the parties that the hearing would be held on March 24th, but at 2 p.m. On the morning of the scheduled hearing, the ALJ discovered the timing discrepancy and did call the complainant to notify her that the hearing would be held at 10 a.m. instead of 2 p.m. When the complainant did not answer, the ALJ left a message informing the complainant that the hearing would be at 10 rather than 2. The hearing proceeded that morning on the 24th of March. The complainant did not appear, and PGW moved to dismiss the matter with prejudice for lack of prosecution. The initial decision granted PGW's motion and dismissed the complaint with prejudice. An argument could be made that because the hearing times in the hearing notice and the pre-hearing order differed, that the complainant was not afforded due process. To cure this error, we believe that the ALJ's initial decision, which dismissed the case with prejudice, should be modified to dismiss without prejudice. This will allow the complainant to refile the complaint, should she so choose. Therefore, we move that the initial decision be modified consistent with this position, and that the Office of Special Assistance draft an opinion and order consistent with this motion. Thank you.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Vice Chairman Coleman. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0. The full matter before us as amended by the motion. Without objection, we'll just take the previous roll call of 5-0.
Continuing with matters on behalf of the Office of Administrative Law Judge, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the next three recommendations, those being ALJ Hoyer's recommended decision with regard to the rate increase involving Venango Water Company and the settlement found therein, as well as ALJ Hoyer's recommended decision involving the settlement of the BE Road Sewer Company rate case. And then on page 30, ALJ Hoyer's recommended decision in the proceeding involving the Plumer Water Company settlement.
Do I have a motion to accept the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Cawley, second by Commissioner Powelson. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
With regard to ALJ Long's initial decision in the proceeding involving Daniel C. Matesic versus Duquesne Light Company, there is your motion, Chairman Brown, as well as the statement of Commissioner Whitmer.
Do I have a motion to call up the staff recommendation for consideration?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion to call up the staff recommendation by Commissioner Whitmer, second by Commissioner Powelson. At this time, I will turn it over to the Vice Chairman to preside, since I do have a motion.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'd like to recognize Chairman Brown for the purposes of her motion.
On August 20th, 2014, Daniel Matesic filed a formal complaint challenging Duquesne Light Company's failure to properly post payment and objecting to the provisioning of his Social Security number without a guarantee it will be kept secure. Staff recommendation concludes that the 10 calendar days between the complainant's online payment and the respondent's crediting the account for the payment was reasonable, despite the termination of service for non-payment that occurred the day before respondent credited the payment. I disagree and believe an additional $500 penalty based on these record facts is appropriate. I also think that respondent and the Bureau of Consumer Services should meet to develop the processes needed to credit online payments expeditiously and to protect the integrity of sensitive customer information, including Social Security numbers. Therefore, I move that Duquesne be assessed an additional penalty of $500. Duquesne and the Bureau of Consumer Services meet to ensure that the company has adequate processes in place to credit expeditiously a customer's online website payment. Third, Duquesne and BCS meet to ensure that the company has adequate processes in place to protect the integrity of sensitive customer information, including Social Security numbers, and has adequate processes in place for when a change is made to the identifying information of a customer's account. And four, OSA prepare a opinion and order consistent with this motion.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
I'd like to recognize Commissioner Whitmer for the purposes of her statement. Commissioner Whitmer?
Thank you, Vice Chair. The Commission today addressed the complaint of Daniel Matesic against Duquesne Light. Mr. Matesic alleges that Duquesne did not properly post a payment to his account in time to avoid termination of his service. When he contacted the company to restore his service, he was required to provide his Social Security number over the telephone, to which he also objected. Upon provision of his Social Security number, the complainant was advised by the Duquesne customer service representative that a different Social Security number was associated with his account. The error occurred when Duquesne's computer system associated the complainant's service address with a service address at which his parents had resided, thereby adding the complainant's mother's Social Security number to his account and removing his Social Security number. The error was not discovered until the complainant contacted Duquesne about his termination of service. Fortunately, it does not appear that the complainant's personal identifying information or identity was compromised as a result of this error. However, this does not mitigate the serious concerns brought to light about Duquesne's handling of a customer's sensitive information. The fact that Duquesne had an undetected issue with their computer system relative to sensitive information highlights how potentially susceptible our critical infrastructure systems can be to cyber threats. In 2014, the energy sector accounted for 32% of all cyber attacks against the 16 critical infrastructure sectors tracked by the United States Department of Homeland Security. This fact alone underscores the critical nature of cybersecurity in the energy sector. I understand that personal identifying information helps to provide an expedient way to appropriately associate customers with correct service addresses, but that need is matched by a utility's responsibility to properly protect the information to do so. This case serves as a good reminder about the importance of cybersecurity and customer protection at a time when both technology and cyber threats are constantly evolving. The Commission takes very seriously the need to be vigilant about cybersecurity and provides resources to assist with preparedness, such as the Cybersecurity Best Practices Guide for Small and Medium Utilities, which is available on our website. Please consider this as a reminder to all of the Commission's regulated utilities of their regulatory responsibility to continuously address both their cyber and physical security plans, as well as their emergency response plans. Our regulated utilities should also examine the interplay between these areas and take steps to remediate any issues, especially when involving specific customer identifying information. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Whitmer, for the purpose of your statement. Is there any other discussion? If not, we have a motion from Chairman Brown, a second from Commissioner Colley. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unopposed? Motion carries 5-0, noting the statement of Commissioner Whitmer. And I'll return the agenda to Chairman Brown.
For final disposition of the matter as amended by my motion, if there's no objection, we will take the previous roll call 5-0.
Madam Chairman and Commissioners, that does conclude the presentation of regular agenda items. Turning now to the carry-in agenda. It is recommended on behalf of the Bureau of Technical Utility Services that the Commission adopt the recommendation to register the security certificate involving Consolidated Communications of Pennsylvania Company, LLC, and Consolidated Communications Enterprise Services, Inc.
Do I have a motion to accept the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Powelson, second by Vice Chairman Coleman. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
We now turn to the joint motion of Vice Chairman Coleman and Commissioner Powelson with regard to a review of the Commission's transportation regulations.
We'll recognize Commissioner Powelson for his motion. Do you have any statements?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will read the motion here this morning. Let me start off by thanking the Vice Chairman, our transportation staffs, our Law Bureau, and Bureau of Transportation Safety. This past year, we launched an initiative known as Transportation 2.0, and I need not remind anybody in this room about a little entity known as Transportation Network Companies in July of last year and some of the issues we faced, as many commissions face, with transportation network companies. It led us into a broader discussion in looking at the transportation landscape and how it's changed since many of our antiquated legacy regulations were adopted. And here we are today initiating a motion that seeks a review of our transportation regs in two stages. The first stage will include a series of rulemakings to examine whether to eliminate the requirement that motor carrier applicants demonstrate that the proposed service will fulfill a useful public purpose, responsive to a public demand or need, otherwise known as the need requirement. The PUC recently amended the regulations governing household good carriers to eliminate the need requirement. And in doing so, the PUC found that in light of increased competition in the motor carrier industry, this requirement had become outdated. and it obviously initiated a rulemaking that was approved by the Independent Regulatory Review Commission. So in the first stage of this review that we're outlining today in the joint motion, the PUC will consider whether to extend the action taken in the household goods rulemaking to other common carriers here in the Commonwealth. These rulemakings will examine whether to eliminate the need requirement in several categories of common motor carriers. Additionally, under these rulemakings, the PUC will propose to no longer consider the effect that increased competition will have on existing carriers. And we believe with these changes, competition among the carriers will determine whether a given carrier's service is needed by the public, rather than determining public need by means of an administrative process, which again, as outlined in discussions on our Transportation 2.0 working group, are antiquated and not reflective of the current marketplace. The second stage of the review will initiate a rulemaking to undertake a comprehensive examination of the PUC's transportation regulations, a more holistic approach. The transportation industry, as you've heard me say earlier, has evolved in numerous ways since the PUC drafted its transportation regulations. By the way, some of those transportation regulations date back to the 1950s. So we believe it's a good practice here to ensure a successful and coordinated effort in accomplishing, one, a thorough review of our current transportation regs. By the way, I need not remind anybody in this room, and it's been expressed by our Vice Chairman, we will not cut corners around safety as we move into this this thorough review of our transportation regulations. And we believe that the collective expertise in our bureaus will undoubtedly result in a more comprehensive and up-to-date set of regulations to govern the transportation industry. And Madam Chair, I hope it will alleviate you from any future hearings in the General Assembly on our transportation regulations. Therefore, we move here this morning that the Law Bureau begin a rulemaking to examine whether to eliminate from various common carrier classifications the requirement that motor carrier applicants demonstrate that their proposed service will fulfill a useful public purpose responsive to a public demand or need. And finally, that the Law Bureau, Bureau of Technical Utility Services, and Bureau of Investigation Enforcement undertake a rulemaking to generally review and update the Commission's common carrier regulations. Thank you.
We have a joint motion of Commissioner Powelson and Vice Chairman Coleman. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Commissioner Colley. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
And finally, Madam Chairman, we have your motion with regard to the ratification of appointments to the Consumer Advisory Council.
I will turn it over to Vice Chairman Coleman to preside, since I have the motion.
Thank you, Chairman Brown, and I'd like to recognize you at this moment for the purposes of your motion.
I move for the ratification and acceptance of the appointments to the Consumer Advisory Council.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Any discussion? We have a motion from Chairman Brown, a second from Commissioner Whitmer. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And I will return the agenda to Chairman Brown.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody. Do we have anything else before us?
Madam Chairman, that concludes the presentation of agenda items.
Thank you. Before we adjourn today, I do want to note that we will be having a tribute for our dear Commissioner Colley after this public meeting. So we are asking everyone to please stay around for this ceremony, brief ceremony. And with that, if there's nothing else before us and there's no further objection, we will adjourn the meeting.